Hi, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to Women Leading People, an interview series created to inspire and empower women as people managers. Every week, we bring in an amazing female leader to talk to us about her experience getting into management and hopefully inspire and empower you if you're doing the same. I'm so excited to have with us today Shubhi Saxena, who is product manager at Yellow Messenger. Shubhi, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks a lot for having me here. Really excited.
It's great to have you. So, I mean, we caught up briefly, and I've understood a little bit about your full journey. And really, I just want to start, and if you could share with everyone who's listening. And by the way, at any point, if you've got any questions, feel free to type them and post them in the comments. But Shubhi, can you tell us a little bit about your first experience getting into management and a leadership role?
Yeah, sure. So I have actually held several leadership positions before my actual job itself. And I think those were more sort of foundational and fundamental in shaping me as a leader. So I'll kind of start from there to give context. So the first time I got a real people manager job was when we actually started a maker space and a startup incubator in our university, along with a couple of alumni. So I was the first general manager there, and we ended up recruiting around 35 students from different areas and backgrounds to sort of run that makerspace. So it had its own budget and everything. And I think that was more challenging because we had to get work done without really paying those students, right? To put it really straightforward. While there was a lot of learning, there was no monetary income really. So I learned a lot of influencing and a lot of people management skills over there. And after that, I joined Yellow Messenger, which is where I work currently. So it's basically a B2B AI SaaS startup, and we build conversational AI solutions, right? So it's like a platform on which you can build really awesome AI-based voice and chat solutions. So that's where I am right now. And I joined 2 years back when they were 20 people, and right now they have scaled to 500 people, right? So I kind of was really lucky to see that journey from 20 to 500. And of course, I grew myself in that journey. And I around a year and a half back, I got a manager and a leadership position over there. So right now, my role is to lead certain key product initiatives for Yellow Messenger, which include both business and product related goals. And I'm managing a team of around 6 people, which majorly includes software developers and product managers within the company.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing just that background. So you had a little bit of experience going in, but let's be honest, the business has gone from 20 to 500 people. So in startup land where everything is moving so quickly, the bar is really high, the expectations are high, you're expected to drive really high outcomes or bold outcomes, as you've referred to them. There must have been so many challenges in being able to ensure that your team is staying creative and motivated through all of that. So that really brings us on to tonight's theme that's really unique to you. So I'd love to understand, going into that role, what were some of the key challenges that you faced?
Sure. So I think when we look at this topic, there are two key axes we need to look at. First is how do you drive bold outcomes, and second is how do you do it in a startup like environment, right? Which is very different from a more established business. So there are specific challenges to both of these. I'll cover both one by one. So when you talk about, say, a startup, right, there are some things that are very different. And I've also worked at very large companies. I was, in fact, an intern at Microsoft, and I worked with DE Shaw as well, which were really established, right? So I think what really changes is that one is absolutely the speed of execution is much more fast. Second is you are usually competing against very well established players, which quite evidently have way more resources than you do. And third is there's a very clear lack of clarity, right? So you sort of have a vague idea of the school product that you want to build, but you have never really seen it. So if you're working with a team and trying to get it built, how you communicate that vision to them, how do you keep them motivated with the lack of resources that you have, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
that's typically what the challenges that we faced at a startup. And there's a very good book on it as well. I will quote from there once or twice as well, if there's a relevant question. But that book is The Messy Middle. It's by Scott Belsky. Scott Belsky was the co-founder of Behance, and right now
Mm-hmm.
he's the chief product officer at Adobe. So he terms this whole thing as the messy middle. So let's say you have like this really cool idea, and you are in the honeymoon period where you are all excited about this amazing thing that you will build.
Mm-hmm.
Um, right? But then once the honeymoon period is over, how do you really take that idea from the initial idea stage to a full blown product, which has a certain degree of adoption? And that's what
Mm-hmm.
the middle journey is all about. So there's an entire book on it. I will not repeat all of what he says. We can just drop the link after the call. So that's the one thing, right? So that's the context we need to understand. That's the context we are operating from when we talk about startups. And the second part that you touched upon was being a first time manager. So I think those most of it you would have heard already, right? So first I just try to understand, okay, what is the job of a manager? In product management, there is a concept of jobs to be done. And what jobs to be done framework means is that when a customer is buying a product, they are basically hiring the product for a certain job, right? Similarly, if my organization is hiring me as a manager, there's a certain job that I'm expected to do. So, what is that job really, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
what I figured was that my understanding of it is that you have a bunch of people who can drive X outcome when they work individually, right? So, your job as a manager is to add multiplier on top of it. So when you bring those 4 or 5 people together over the same amount of time, can you drive 2x, 3x, or 4x the value out of that group as a whole? Right. So I think that's the core job of a manager. So yeah, understanding that was the biggest challenge, to be honest. That what am I supposed to do, right? Is the job to conduct meetings? Is it to conduct one-on-ones? Is it to set OKRs? None of these is the job, right? The core job is to drive more value, and you do all of this to essentially drive that outcome. Second was, of course, always this question of am I good enough? So a lot of self-doubt because I was doing it for the first time. And even I was very new in the journey. I was learning a lot of stuff myself. So I think what really helped there was some level of self-awareness and just vulnerability, right? Just admitting that, hey, I am very much a work in progress, and most probably I haven't figured it out, but I'm willing to discuss this with you, hear your point of view, and help you in whatever way I can by putting in my 200%. So that's how I sort of went through this whole thing. A lot of other stuff. I mean, we can just keep going on and on. I think the third one was initially, I am not really a very extrovert person, but I was very lucky to always have had great managers, and I really understood the importance of a good relationship between a manager and the colleague, right, or the peer.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll tell you why it's even more important in a fast-growing startup. So, what I think, my hypothesis is that the amount of communication that needs to happen to get anything done. Let's say you want to achieve X outcome, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
amount of communication that needs to happen, it's inversely proportional to the amount of trust within the team. So if everyone is like really good friends with each other, they know the modus operandi, there's a single philosophy of uh, what the end goal is, you can achieve the same outcome with less communication, less meetings, less back and forth, and less documentation and processes, right? And this is very important for a startup because essentially you want to deliver fast. When you're competing against very large companies, your one of your very few advantages is that speed. So, in short, if you want to drive very good outcomes in a fast growth environment, communication has to be very clear, crisp, and to do great communication, you need to have trust within the organization, right, and within your team. So yeah, just the it's actually, I think it's really underrated how important it is to build very good, close personal relationships with each and every person that you manage, and that's something that I actively try to do as well. So I think those were the three key things if we were to point out.
Yeah. And what's the sweet spot to keeping people accountable? How many meetings do you actually need? How important is a one-to-one in setting these OKRs? And then how do you actually do that in practice?
Sure, sure. So, so I think, in my opinion, one-on-ones are definitely very important. Even if you are, I mean, they are undoubtedly important in this remote work situation where everyone is working remotely. But even if you are working with that person in the same office, you do not get that psychological safety or that safe space to talk
Mhm.
about anything and everything, right? And as a manager, I think again this is very important to be very upfront and explicit, to have your expectations as well as your feedback laid out really well and not really sugarcoat it or wrap it up. So a one-on-one is essentially a safe space to do that without hurting anyone's feelings, and also to get a lot of feedback. Right, it goes both ways. So when I say share really blunt feedback, I am also expecting very blunt feedback in terms of how I can do better, right? And probably a perspective that I'm missing out on, and so on. So I do one-on-ones every 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks,
Mhm.
individually. But at the same time, we also have an alternate day cadence where everyone just comes together and spends 10-15 minutes on what we have been working on and so on. So I just tell you the structure how we operate. So I've got a team of 6 people, and these are essentially, this is the core team. I work with other teams as well, but let's just
Mhm.
take this example. So it's a team of 6 people, and they are working on two different initiatives, right? So I have, and again, the idea is you don't want to have too many meetings too, like you said, right? So we have one meeting for each of these initiatives. It's like sort of a 45-minute meeting a week to go over the overall progress and what's to be done next week. And then there's a bi-weekly one-on-one with each of these individuals. And finally, there is also a common, just like a 45-minute. It's not really a meeting as such. It's more of a chill time where people just talk about what they learned. And we usually ask, like we just take one question as the agenda and drive that. So a common question is, what do you think we are not doing right now? And people just throw their ideas about that, and that's a very chill meeting. You can actually just get food, you can get beer, we order stuff for people, so it's a much more open environment where people can just share stuff. And a lot of our work and communication happens offline, not on meetings. So we follow documentation pretty strictly, and also just being very active on Slack. So there's a lot of sort of Slack etiquettes that are defined within the team that people adhere to, and that just makes it easier to get stuff done with fewer meetings. So yeah, that's the cadence that we follow. So that
Yeah,
was
I
on
mean, I'm
one-on-ones, right? And again, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I recently started using Slack as well, and I think you need the rules there. Otherwise, it just becomes this sea of red, and you don't know where to
Yeah,
look. So yeah, that's Slack etiquette, all
absolutely.
about it. So what about outside of the one-to-ones?
Yeah. Yeah, and on Slack, by the way, I have just turned all notifications off, except for a few key channels and key people, right? Because it just gets a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so outside one-on-ones, so we talked about one-on-ones and then the team meetings, right? And then, of course, there is a quarterly objective setting cycle, OKR planning, right? And there are again very good resources on how to set good OKRs. Those things could take another 1 hour, so I will not dive into them. I
Mm-hmm.
can probably just share my screen and quickly show you how you would go about setting OKRs, right? So
Yeah,
let's share
please
one
do. I'll
second.
just enable that so that we can see your screen.
Yeah. Yeah, so just in terms of documentation, right? We have an onboarding document. Whenever someone joins, we kind of just share this with them as first thing, so that they get a very broad context of team, company. And it's written in a very fun, laid down way. There's even sort of an org chart of where you are within the org to give them that
Mm-hmm.
perspective, because we don't really have all of the setup. We are still a startup. We don't really have very well defined org charts and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
then just a lot of demos on what different products look like, what kind of value are we deriving, what does the roadmap look like, etc. I think another really important thing, also, right, like a bunch of things that you could read on our industry and our product. And I think what's really important is, I was talking about Slack etiquettes as well, is just for everyone to be aligned on what's the modus operandi, right? How do we operate as a team? So we have kept it really simple. There's essentially just a list of do's and don'ts, which is part of the onboarding document. And whenever someone joins, they're just sort of expected to go through it. If they think these are not good, they can just let us know and we are open to changing them. But if they agree with these, then everyone in the team just follows them. They're pretty straightforward things like, don't wait for people to tell you what to do, ask questions, join this Slack channel, think about business problem and user experience before jumping on the solution, manage your time well. There are resources around how you can do that, and a bunch of don'ts as well, right? So don't be shy, don't be afraid to ask questions, don't hide the truth, call a spade, don't turn up late to meetings, don't rush to a buggy solution without thinking of the problem. If you think about
Hmm.
it, right, these are very broad in nature, but what this leads to is you have sort of created a product development philosophy for the team now, right? And if everyone adheres, you can do everything else in the world. So we give you full freedom, do whatever else you want. Just follow these 10 do's and 10 don'ts. And that's really good because you are giving them a lot of freedom, but at the same time, you are ensuring that everyone is aligned in one direction. So I think this is a very good tool that people can follow as well,
Definitely. Thanks for sharing. And I think you
right?
said that this came
So
from the CEO of Twitter, right? This was from Jack, who
yeah,
had shared this,
Jack
right?
Dorsey's
Yeah,
talk.
Jack
Yeah.
Darcy.
So yeah. We can share all of those links in a comment. I'll probably just add it on YouTube after our call. So that came from one of the talks, and even Jack took it from one of Bill Walsh's books, I think, which is The Score Takes Care of Itself. So it's more around sports psychology and coaching. But then how
Mm-hmm.
do you use those principles in into management? So that is one, and so this is how we conduct retros. I'll quickly show you our retro doc as well. This is an example of a retro I conducted with my manager, and I've just removed a bunch of stuff which was not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be revealed, right?
Yep.
So if you see like what were my lessons, thoughts, general stuff, and then the method we follow is I ask my manager, hey, what are the things that you think I should start doing, I should stop doing, and continue doing? And that again drives a lot of clarity. Just these three simple questions. This is a very good way of getting feedback on the job, right, and not on the person. So really like these three questions too. And then yeah, just ask them about what do you think, what skills did I improve on, what are the areas of improvement for let's say next quarter, what's the direction like, so what are my manager's priorities, what challenges do they oversee, and then that kind of drills down into my goals. Right, so
Mm-hmm.
this is one way of doing it, and you can also have it at a company level. I cannot show company OKRs. I just did a personal version of OKR, so I just show that because
Thank
I
you.
can't show the company OKRs, and I didn't have the time to remove the
No, that's
stuff
fine.
out of
That's
it.
fine. This
So,
is great.
so
It's good to see the nitty gritty.
yeah, so I'll share the links with you again on some good resources on how to do OKRs. Essentially, one good way to think about it is you have your company annual objectives, and from there you get to your team annual objectives, right? For each of your teams or your product annual objectives. And from your product annual objectives, you have got your product quarterly objectives, and from there you can actually define your key results and your initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
And each of these have different meanings, etc. Again, we'll have to park that for later. So if you see here, this is like my objective is very broad. It's not really measurable, right? So the objective is like just learn to think independently. It's a very broad objective.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are certain key results that I have defined, and I'm saying that, hey, if I do these three things, I think I would have learned to think independently to the extent that I want to, right? So the key results are mentioned a bunch of key results here, and then what are the initiatives that I'm taking to do this? In personal OKRs, I think habits are better than initiatives because they are more
Mm.
fundamental. So you can just put your initiatives here or habits, whatever, right? And then what's the timeline that you're looking at? So these goals, my timeline is I can do it whenever in the year, but then maybe something I want to do more urgently. So I just want to book a trip for my mom and dad after COVID, and there's a certain timeline to that. So yeah, this is how you can do OKRs too.
This is wonderful. And I also really like seeing the personal perspective here. It helps make it easier to understand. And I guess what I would also note about those OKRs is that there's something really ambitious. They're a big statement. They're a big goal. So it's
Yes,
not just something that you're perfectly comfortable achieving, because then it's not really challenging you.
absolutely,
So you
absolutely.
kind of want it. It's kind of the opposite of smart goals. Like you don't want to achieve it 100% because then you've got nowhere to go. So
Absolutely.
really great to
Yes.
like be a better daughter. We can all be better daughters all the time. So no, that's really great to see. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I guess I'd like to dig in a little bit more into your onboarding process. So am I right that you're working remotely now?
Yes, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what additional challenges have been brought on? Because you've obviously onboarded so many people during the pandemic when you've had to work remotely, and you don't have someone that you can just tap on the shoulder and be like, "Hey, how do I solve this problem, or how do I get into this document that I've been trying to access?" Small things. So, how do you go about
Absolutely.
that?
Yeah.
How do you go about onboarding people remotely? Like, what have you learnt on that?
Definitely. So again, I think you can break that down as well into three things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
one is the whole communication or the people aspect. So the people who have joined, do they feel heard, and are they just basically able to align with the overall all goals of the company, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
one. Then you've got your process aspect. Are they clear of how to get something done? Are they clear of how they can apply for leaves? Etc. How often does, let's say, company, I don't know, like, let's say, how often we go on team outings or whatever, right? So
Mm.
those are processes. And then third is technology. Technology is first is getting them access to. So we typically give devices to every new person who joins the organization. We give them a MacBook. So
Mhm,
now it has been a big challenge because people are spread all over India, and we had to
mhm.
actually courier these devices to them. And
Yeah.
then they would face issues with those devices. So just helping them figure those out was a challenge too. So I think these are the
Mhm,
three pillars in which you can divide this. Uh, I think obviously, I mean, what has really worked is one is having a very clear workflow that the HR team drives. The onboarding document that I talked about, the managers have to spend way more time with every employee now, for sure, right? And I try
mhm,
and encourage my team to turn videos on whenever they can, or at least in the weekend, in the Friday meetings that we have, right? So that there's
mhm,
that personal connection that develops. And I personally put in a lot of effort in understanding where everyone is in their journey, what is their career objective like, how are they generally feeling about things, right? Are they stressed out? And since we are still younger, we are still 500, we have that luxury to do it,
mhm,
right? So that is one. Other thing that happens a lot is apprenticeship model. So you sort of just assign a mentor or a buddy that they can always reach out to.
mhm.
It becomes way more important during remote onboarding too. So yeah, these are some of the things that have worked out for us.
Excellent. Thanks so much. I know that's definitely been a big challenge onboarding new people. So then it would also be good to, get to that bit of actually motivating a team. So you've onboarded them. How do you keep a team motivated when they might be sitting alone? Everything out in their outside life or the rest of their life might not be super positive. So how do you keep people
Yeah.
motivated at work and keep them delivering at such a high standard?
Yes, yes, sure. Um, so yeah, I think my mantra has been, I told you in the last call as well, what I really uh, feel is that the biggest motivator is a sign of progress, right? So
Mm,
as a manager, it's our job to basically merchandise our team's vision. So the way you would do that is, assume you have to develop a project. First thing, give it a name, right? Just by giving it a name, that thing now has an identity. It's a destination that we want to reach. Keep talking about it, and not that thing, right? But keep talking about why we want to do that thing, and why is it so
mhm,
important, and what kind of impact would that have on the company. And one positive we have here is, since we are still a very small team, sorry, like a very small company, right? Every team's work has very direct, explainable impact on the company's revenue itself. So
Mhm.
it's sort of easier to tie that back to real world impact, right? So I think as a manager, I would just say, just keep showing them how much progress we are making, even when they can't see it, right? Just add that perspective. So when you go on the weekly call and you ask them, hey, what did you do? And they probably are not that excited. They're like, we didn't do much. We could only do 70% of what we promised. But then you are the person who should come and say, hey, see, we did this 70%. Now let's look at why we could not do the other 30%. And you kind of just change the perspective there, right? So when you look at that 30%, you just remold that as an opportunity instead of a failure, and you start talking about, hey, let's learn something from this, and let's see how we can achieve this. Did we not measure it correctly? But then again, see, you learned this or something and you did a great job. So I mean, I am not telling you anything new, it's common sense, but if I were to put some words to it, one is merchandise the team's vision. Keep talking about why you are doing it a lot, right? Show that you are personally invested in it, right? If it's just a project that is on Jira with 10 tasks, nobody is going to feel motivated about it. So if you personally show that you are invested in it, you are yourself trying a lot to learn about this problem and solve it, people would definitely feel motivated by that. And always contextualize and add your perspective to failures so that the team doesn't get demotivated and they keep moving forward. Another thing you can do, which is subjective to the situation, is this idea of celebrating small wins. So it really depends, right? If you are at a stage where all you're seeing is challenges, and things are not moving forward, it's probably a good idea to celebrate small wins. But then don't overdo it, where something which is not which is just a vanity metric, right? We are just celebrating that and just start looking at wrong data and stuff. So don't
Mhm.
overdo it, but that can help as well. So it's, if you look at it, all I'm talking about is maintain the emotional energy of the team, right? A very simple thing you can do as a manager is, and one thing you have to remember, something which you asked about challenges initially, but something that came to my mind was that I was sort of a strong individual contributor, right? So
Mhm.
whenever I would look at a problem, I was really, uh, I just wanted to go ahead and solve it, right? I did not want to share it with five other people, bring five people on board, explain to them, and then motivate them. That was just so taxing. But then
Mhm.
again, if you remember my definition of job of a manager, it's to get better outcome from a group of people, right? It's not to do the work myself.
Yeah.
So it happens a lot in tough times, right? Where things are not working. Let's say you ask someone to do market research and they did not really come up with any insights. They literally just went to five different websites and just took screenshots and showed them to you. You have to remember your role as a manager and you have to guide them and not jump on doing that task yourself.
Yeah,
That helps as
definitely.
well. Yeah,
And I'll
yeah.
also
I think
share,
these
so
are some.
Jaideep is saying, really interesting take on OKRs. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you're implementing them as well. So thank you. And feel free to post any questions for anyone who's watching. But Shubhi, I mean, I think what you're saying around celebrating these small wins, and probably like the last year, most businesses have just faced challenge after challenge after
Yeah,
challenge. So that's kind of unsurprising. But I think it also helps to shift away from blame culture, just remembering that it's not, we're not going to focus on the thing that went wrong, but why did it go this way?
yes,
And then maybe
exactly.
how can we make it better? So I love that, just celebrating all those smaller wins, and that's your job, right? To be a cheerleader and be positive. But you had a
Absolutely.
really interesting way of looking at credit. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more around that. So what is credit or
Yeah,
giving
sure.
credit?
So, yeah, absolutely. So, what happens in a fast growing company is that there would always be more opportunities than the number of people who can handle it, generally, right? There would be more work that then, if you I mean, people can obviously do it, and that's why companies like Airbnb and Stripe are built. But if you were to stick to regular definition of a job, then you would not be able to. So you'll have to sort of think differently.
Mm.
So that basically leads us to the concept of delegation, right? Who does what? When we as a team start discovering, looking at a problem and discovering new opportunities, who takes up what? And what I feel is that in a startup, a lot of times actually work is not delegated from top down, from a manager to an employee, but it's actually the other way around, is what I have noticed. So if
Mm.
someone as an employee is really good at something, right? They enjoy doing it, then typically they kind of just delegate it to themselves. They just take it up. And the culture and the process and the attitude of the company is such that it's enabled. So this is one delegation, and I'll tie it back to the original question in just a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, also the second thing that you mentioned, which was basically credit and feedback. So I think one is there is a good way and a bad way to give credit, right? When you give credit to someone, you should never say, hey, great job, congratulations, and clap emoji. That doesn't work. You should actually tell them exactly what is it that you're giving them credit for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it for, let's say, the speed of execution? Is it for their tactical thinking? Is it for the amazing code that they wrote? Whatever it is. And what happens, what starts happening is this credit starts becoming a weapon of influence, right? So if a person is receiving a lot of great positive feedback for design, it's sort of obvious, right, that they are really good at design, or at least they are really good at design in the context of the project that we are working on.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, that person starts wielding more influence and authority within the team in a good sense, which just helps in delegating new opportunities faster, and it also helps a lot in getting decisions made faster. Because if, let's say, now there are four people looking at a problem which is really complex, and if all of them were just doubting themselves, the decision would not happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then now let's say if there is this imbalance where it's kind of obvious and it's known to everyone that, hey, looks like this person has been historically doing really well when it comes to similar problems, because of the credit that they have got, that person can just take the lead and make a decision and move things forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why credit is like a very underrated but very important tool within a company. And I think also you should never misuse it, because that really discourages ambitious hardworking people. So if you give people credit for something which was just a part of their job and nothing out of the ordinary, right, and they receive a lot of credit for it, I mean, that will obviously demotivate the others, and especially ambitious people like me. So yeah, you should sort of just take care of the other way around as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, and was actually a learning for me to not always give credit to people, because you generally want to recognize when someone is doing a good job, even if it's just their job. And it's like you said, there's a space for that. So you can kind of give feedback on the
Yeah.
things you can continue doing, but it's making sure that you're making a bigger deal of it when they've done something that's out of the ordinary, just to highlight, who you're, someone who's done a key job or a really important job in that time. So I think that's hugely important. So I hadn't thought of credit
Absolutely.
as a powerful weapon of influence. So I found that really interesting. And I guess the next thing is really just any advice that you had on, you said feeling a lot of people feeling like they're doubting themselves or feeling this imposter syndrome when you're going into a new management role. How did you deal with that, and what did you find helpful?
Sure. So I had two approaches. One was more qualitative, where I just reached out to a lot of mentors. Right. So one is have an amazing relationship with your manager, so
Mm-hmm.
that you can take very direct, specific feedback from them. And if they say you are doing okay, because they have the most context of what you're working on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if they say you are doing okay, you can take that as very good reinforcing feedback. So that helps cut down on the imposter syndrome. Second is you can also talk to outside people, people who are your mentors, because they can give that outsider's perspective, which probably your mentor cannot or your manager cannot bring in. So I actually had a mentor at that time when I had switched, and we would just go on weekly calls, and we would just talk about what went well, what did not go well, and what are the problems that we can solve, what can I do about it. And the third is data driven aspect of it, right? So I was very diligent and I still try to do it, but as initially very diligent on having like a daily check in with myself on what we achieved today, and a
Mm,
weekly check-in, right, of what we did last week and what is our goal next week towards the broader 6 month objective. And that was just data driven. You could see on the paper that things are moving. And that also helped reinforce this new energy. And just I think I still have a huge imposter syndrome. Before getting into this call, I was thinking whether I'm qualified to do it. So that will always be there. But I think all you need to do is just figure out how do you manage it.
yeah, I'm so grateful that you said that, because it doesn't get easier, right? You're always going to feel like you don't know. And kind of like you said,
Yeah.
if you're a new manager joining a startup, a lot of the people that are reporting to you will know more than you know. They'll already
Yes.
have a lot of the ground,
Absolutely.
and the ideas will come from down up. So kind of know that you're feeling it, but then do the thing anyway, which is,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, that's really
Just show
the
up. Just show up. Do your goddamn thing. That's it.
yes, thank you for showing up and doing this. And absolutely, I mean, I've wanted to talk to, female leaders who are at different levels, right? Because we're not always going to have hundreds of years of experience. And this is the real stuff that you're actually concerned with. It's like, do I need to
Yeah.
book in a load of meetings? How often? What do I even talk about when I have the review? So I think some of those methods of like, here's what I should, here's what the person should continue doing, stop, start, and continue, like all of this stuff just becomes a bit of a framework. So do you have any other advice for people who are going into their first time management role?
Hmm. I think that's. I think I need to collect my thoughts on that a little bit because it's sort of like a green
So
field,
much.
right? I just tell you a bunch of stuff. One is, I mean, just go for it, right? Don't hesitate. We talked about imposter syndrome and ways of dealing with it.
Mhm,
Um, Also, use a lot of templates and frameworks. There's already a lot of stuff available out there. If you wanted to start with a few books, again, we'll share the links, but you can start with The Messy Middle, The Making of a Manager, and then there's this book, Hard Things About Hard Things. Right, so you could just start with these three. These would give you all the common templates and frameworks that you need
mm,
to work for a fast growth startup. Next, I would say ask a lot of questions as a manager, right? So I think we still do not put enough focus on being a proactive listener. Listening is like a very passive activity, right? But if
mhm,
you want to really be able to serve your team, you have to be a great listener. If they say, I could not complete this, don't just sort of rush into, hey, what's wrong? Or you said you would do it, but you did not really have anything else to do. Why couldn't you do it, right?
mhm,
Just literally really ask them why. Ask them questions to contextualize their statement, because a lot of times, at least in my context, it was a startup and most of the people were just out of college, right? So they did not have a lot of, they were not great at communication, at putting their points forward, and putting their sort of challenges forward as well. So you really need to ask great questions from your team. It helps in a lot of ways. One is understanding why things are not moving, understanding what you can do differently, and also a lot of times it sort of, it's a great way to have influence without showing authority, right? So if there is a problem that the team is trying to solve and there is a very obvious solution to it, instead of just telling them to do it, just ask them why, or how, right? And just lead them to the solution. And it's common knowledge that if someone feels that they have derived the solution themselves, they feel more motivated to do it. So you can use questions in that way as well.
yeah.
Another thing is, uh, I think this I should have sort of mentioned earlier. I'm just thoughts are getting jumbled up, but try to pick a good project as a manager if you can, right? If you have a choice where you have to lead a project, try to pick a good one, because that's something you have control on. Don't pick a problem that's too hard to solve. Not too hard, I mean, that's sort of just unachievable to solve with the given resources, or that's not
Mhm,
impactful enough, right? So pick a good problem to solve. Be hands on. We talked about emotional energy. We talked about how you have to be a good salesperson, you have to merchandise. I think one thing I have learned, I tweeted about it recently also. So recently, a lot of good executives have joined our company, our organization. And the difference that I saw between a great executive and like a not so great executive was it that great executives are amazing editors. So if you go to them and you
Mhm.
say, hey, let's say for you, right, you are building a community, let's say, and you want, let's say, whatever, 5,000 paying members.
Mhm.
And you have three ways in which you can achieve it, right? So if you go to a great leader or a great mentor and you show them these three ways, they would be able to provide you great context on what you should not do, what will definitely not work. And that
Mhm.
way they will end up saving a lot of your time. And the way they
Mhm.
would do it is because they are great at strategic thinking. They've probably done this before or they have seen others do it before, right? And they are familiar with the story, or at least they'll connect you with the right people. So if you as a manager can do that for your team, where you can drive clarity about the problem, help them prioritize, and tell them what they should not do or not waste their time on, they will really respect you a lot because you are saving their time.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
definitely.
those are pretty much what comes to mind right now.
Really good advice. And I think, like you said, there are so many resources out there. So whether it's you're listening to some kind of podcasts or reading these books, like management is, of course, you can have your own style to it, but it's quite a well researched and
Yeah,
documented job role, probably more than any other job role, right? So it's, you should kind of just do your research a little bit. You know, there is guidance out there. So I love that you shared
yeah,
those books, and we'll
yeah,
definitely post those out there, because it's sometimes it's hard to decide, you know, where you might be able to start. So good
absolutely.
to hear
Yes.
from someone who's done it. But I also like your approach about coaching people to get to the right answer. And the example that I use is, who are the people generally in your life who just tell you what to do with no explanation? What's your parents
Hmm.
normally? And do we normally listen to everything our parents tell us to do?
No,
Probably
not
not.
really.
Because they've just given us the answer, and they might have a lot of experience and context, you know, but it's still, you, there's a pride in coming up with the answer yourself. So it's like
Absolutely,
resisting
absolutely,
the urge. And like you said, there's so much
absolutely,
influence to just a good question. So thank you
absolutely.
so much for just sharing your thoughts on that. And if you're happy to let us know, like, what's keeping you up at night right now, what are the big projects that you're working on, and where are you going?
Yeah, sure. So I think yeah, on a professional front, a lot is happening. We closed our Series B last year, so there's a lot of products that are being built, and I'm personally leading some of those. One of those is an enterprise search engine, which will sort of give large enterprises a very unique and new way to be able to search through all of their knowledge. So that's something
Mm.
interesting that we are working on. We are also working a lot on the product marketing front because we are expanding into new markets. We recently closed early customers in US, Canada, Europe. So we are sort of going into those markets as well. So a lot on expansion too. Yeah, and on a personal front, you saw the OKRs. So there's a
Yeah.
lot going on there too. Just learning new stuff, dabbling with a few things. Yeah, lot of stuff around that as well.
That's awesome. So you will be solving the, where is that PowerPoint deck where we had that thing that went to that customer? That you're solving that problem
Yes,
potentially,
yes,
because
we are
it's
solving
saved
that. Absolutely,
somewhere.
absolutely.
Oh, I want to hear more about this, because I definitely have felt this on multiple
Me too,
occasions.
me too. Yes.
That's great. We'll find the problems. But Shubhi, I just really wanted to thank you so much for joining today. I was taking so many notes when we had our introductory call, because I love how much you've looked into the different frameworks and methodologies and applied that, and also looked at yourself. So just really appreciate you sharing that with us. And yeah, hopefully speak to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. It was great doing this. Thanks. Thanks, Eva.
Great. Have a
Bye.
great evening. Bye.
You too.